All right, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. So we have a very exciting chat for you today, and we've got one of the fuller houses we've had in a while. We've got some very special guests, but before we get into that, for those of you who do not know what Products That Count is, Products That Count is focused on discovering what makes great products. We host one of the largest monthly speaker series here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We've got over 15,000 product innovators, product managers, product marketers that make up our community. And what makes us unique is that every month we bring in leaders from companies that are shaping our technology landscape to share a new piece of information, something they haven't shared before, something that they're sharing for the first time with the community. For those of you who have been here before, you probably recognize SC. SC is founder and typical host of Products That Count. She couldn't be here this month because she's in Oslo. She had to add a day. She's part of the Opera Software Foundation board. So she's going to be there for another day. My name is Pierre. I run business development for Products That Count, and I'll be your host this evening. If you have any questions about Products That Count or would like to get involved, just find me afterwards. I'd also like to give a thanks to our sponsors. First, thanks to Yelp for providing this incredible space we're in. And, round of applause for Yelp. Also, Yelp is hiring. We have Rebecca all the way in the back at the hiring table. If you're interested in working for Yelp in a product management or development position, or other position, find Rebecca at the back table, just straight in the back of the room. I'd also like to thank Pragmatic Marketing, one of our sponsors. They provide comprehensive training for product managers and product marketers. They have a training coming up this month in Palo Alto, and then they have another training in San Francisco coming up at the end of April. Definitely check them out, pragmaticmarketing.com. And I'd like to thank WeChat, Future of Mobile and Messaging, one of our great sponsors. This QR code, if you download WeChat, this QR code will get you added to Product That Counts own message room, chat room in WeChat. And we're going to be holding a raffle. Shirley here from WeChat is going to be providing a very special prize to people who sign up for the community. We're going to have a shake raffle, as Shirley called it, at the end of the event. So thank you very much to WeChat. Great. So we've got some very special guests today. This is a first for us in a lot of ways. It's the first time that SC hasn't been here. This is the first time holding a fireside chat. First, I'd like to introduce our moderator. We have Eric Singley from Yelp. Eric actually started off as a product manager at Yelp about 10 years ago and worked his way up. He now is vice president of consumer and mobile. So if you have any problems with Yelp and the consumer interface, you know who to talk to. And we also have Stefan Kazriel, the CEO of Upwork. Stefan has an incredible background working at PayPal, also on the consumer side. He's no longer there, so you can't point fingers. But I worked at Odesk before Odesk and Elance merged to become Upwork. I was head of product and head of engineering there, held dual roles, and now is CEO of Upwork. Just show by a raise of hands, how many of you are familiar with Odesk, Upwork, Elance? Great, a lot of us. I've personally used Upwork many times. It's an incredible platform. It's the largest online workforce in the world, and we're very excited to have these guests with us. So without further ado, Eric and Stefan.
Cool. Thank you. Hey everybody, thanks for coming out tonight to the Yelp House. Appreciate you doing that. So happy to be here with you. Hopefully we have a good chat. So we'll talk for a little bit. I've got a bunch of questions, and then we'll turn it over to you guys in about 20 minutes if you want to start thinking of questions that you have for us now. So I guess to start, we got the brief bio, but maybe if you go in a little bit more, how do you like to describe Upwork to people and what you guys do?
So the short version of this is it's a freelance marketplace, and we connect businesses with knowledge workers, mostly in technology. So web developers, mobile developers, software testers, designers, but also salespeople, consultants, lawyers, accountants, pretty much any type of job that can be done online and remotely.
And so what's the biggest area of job that you guys service for on the product?
Well, so traditionally we're serving early stage technology companies in San Francisco and New York. So that tends to be the buyer side. It's a marketplace, so it's a two-sided network. So the buyer side tends to be, a lot of the people in the room, which is why you raised your hands, which is always a little bit of a mixed blessing, by the way, because people who haven't raised their hands is the people that we can still grow, and everybody who's using us already means we don't have any more growth opportunities. So it's always you don't want to be in a room where nobody raises their hands, because then you're like, okay, that's going to be a tough battle. But if everybody raises their hands, then I need to go on the beach because there's nothing else for me to do. So that's the buyer side. On the supplier side, traditionally we were mostly doing web dev, because that's how we started, and progressively every year we introduce new categories. And usually the new ones grow faster than the old ones, but like we do $1 billion a year, and so for a new one to be meaningful, it takes quite a bit of time. So now 50% of the business is some form of software development, and the other 50% is other types of knowledge work.
Got it. Are there any interesting, obscure categories of worker? Can I hire like a beekeeper freelancer on your site?
I'm always amazed. This is not the core of our business is fairly traditional stuff, right? It's you want to build your mobile app and you're looking for a designer, an iOS developer, an Android developer, the backend guy, the tester, and all that stuff. That's most of what we do. But you always hear about funny stories about people doing like crazy stuff. And I have two recent ones that I've seen. One was a big company on the East Coast, and they were looking to write a research paper on the mutual fund industry in Brazil. And they were like, there's no way on earth we're going to find somebody to write that. And within an hour, they found somebody who came from an investment banking background, was in Brazil, and wrote the report for them. The other one was a company that's buying used MRI equipment in the US and then selling it to hospitals in the developing world, which is clearly not our core competency. But he was looking for, contact details of hospitals in some country in Latin America. And same thing, within a few hours, he finds that. So this tends to be tongue in cheek. I mean, like, it's hard to build $1 billion business out of crazy outlier type of jobs, but you find some pretty, cool stuff there too.
That's cool. So maybe talk a little bit about a couple of things that you guys are working on right now from the product side at Upwork that you're personally excited about.
Yeah. So you hear a lot of people say, marketplaces are hard at the beginning. You need to build liquidity. You need to get product market fit and build liquidity. And there's kind of the underlying conclusion from that is after that it's easy. Man, I wish that was the case. I think it goes from one type of being difficult to another type of being difficult, but every phase has its own challenges. And if I had to summarize where we are today, I think we are in the room, people in the room who raise their hands, I think is very typical. We have, a pretty big market share of our traditional buyer segments. The early stage tech company who really needs to find the mobile developers to build that MVP, to go get seed funding and A funding and all of that stuff. And now we need to go after the more mainstream type of companies, companies that have hundreds or thousands of employees, companies that are not necessarily in tech, and companies that are not necessarily in San Francisco. And, their desire to, when we talk about ourselves as being disruptive, here in San Francisco, people are like, wow, that's awesome. You're disruptive. That's really cool. If you go talk to the head of HR of a Fortune 500 company based in the Midwest and you say, we're going to be disruptive, she looks at you like you're crazy. Like the last thing she wants is something radically different from what she's been doing for the last 35 years. So you progressively need to build a product that is, much closer to what people are used to, which, traditionally when people recruit, they recruit people locally. And for the most part, most of the recruiting is full-time hiring, not, temp type of hiring. And for the most part, when you do recruiting, you talk to a human being. You don't go to a website. If you're a big company, you have your own internal recruiting team, and they themselves might be talking to external recruiting teams, and ultimately, those are the people that are going to be using LinkedIn or Career Builder or Upwork or whatever. And so making the product be so approachable by a more mainstream buyer is, probably one of the biggest themes we have to figure out in the next couple of years.
What kind of things are you thinking about on the product side to accomplish that? So if I could summarize, it sounds like, so you're trying to reach a new audience, you're trying to scale outside of your more traditional customer, which is a more kind of tech savvy, maybe Bay Area audience, and you're trying to be a little bit more broadly appealing. So is that more of is it become more of just a marketing challenge for you, or is it more a product challenge, or are they kind of intertwined?
I mean, it's usually a combination of different things. But, like on the product side, to give you an example, when we started working with enterprise customers, this mostly happened by accident. Some of the early stage companies that we were working with got acquired by well-known technology companies that we all hear about. And when that happened, those companies came to us and said, hey, we just acquired this company and they have 100 of your freelancers. And that's great. But from an IT standpoint, from a legal standpoint, from an HR standpoint, from just about every corporate function, what you do is wrong. And you're going to have to fix it because we're publicly traded. And now we have to disclose this on our books that we just bought a company that's doing something completely wrong. And so we ended up building this enterprise product probably in the worst possible way in some ways, if you will. Traditionally, the way you build products is you go figure out what the customer needs before you launch it. And in our case, it was in the market. People were, heavily involved in using the product, and it was not compliant. So there's a lot of things around, the stuff that everybody in the sharing economy gets sued about. I'm not going to give names of a certain company, but like worker classification, who's a 1099, who's a W-2. Or if you want to do this properly, there are laws, and the laws are different by state. They're obviously different by country, but also different by state. And so you need to build all of that logic to say, hey, this freelancer based on this engagement should be getting a 1099 or should be getting a W-2. So there's a lot of this stuff that needs to happen. But beyond that, it's how do you create a piece of software that feels like you're talking to a human being. Fundamentally, people are used to, bigger companies, they're used to calling their marketing agency and say, I need a web page by tomorrow, and here's the brief, but you guys figure out how to get it done. And they don't like the idea of, oh, no, you get it done. You post a job and figure out the 5 developers and the 3 designers and all that stuff and coordinate the work. That's just not what they expect.
So, I think like many successful companies like yours, on the surface, the business seems kind of simple, right? You have people who are looking to hire folks, and then you have folks that want to be hired. What about the business? So you can give one example. There's regulatory and compliance issues that get a little gnarly. What else about your product or your business is maybe kind of unintuitively tricky?
Yeah, I think that's what great design is about, right? I mean, like, if we manage to make it look like it's easy, then we did a really good job. And like, I actually don't want the users to know that there's complexity, but I think our product, like many other marketplaces, and definitely when we were, doing this at eBay and PayPal, it was the same thing. It's an iceberg. What you see as an end user is what the tip of the iceberg that's above the water, and what's underneath is a lot of complexity and a lot of plumbing. And if I had to summarize, we do 2 things that users don't really see. One is complex processes. We pay people $1 billion a year in 180 countries, right? We pay people in, the Philippines, and we pay people in Brazil, and we pay people in Greece. And all of these are heavily regulated, right? You move money around. So there's a lot of compliance type of work and workflow type of stuff that we need to do. And then the second thing we do is machine learning, right? I mean, on the site today, if you came to the site, there's 150,000 open jobs, and there's 12 million people that are registered, and nobody wants to go sift through 150,000 jobs in order to figure out the one that you should apply for. And conversely, as a client, last thing you want is to have to go through 12 million resumes to figure out the person that you really want to talk to. So the goal for us, and it's, a goal that you can never achieve, is that every job gets a single applicant, and that applicant happens to be the perfect candidate, right? And we're not there, and we're never going to be exactly there, but the better you can learn what the job is about and what the freelancer is interested in, the faster you can make, the more you can reduce the friction, and the faster you'll make the matches happen. And so, in summary, those are like the 2 main things we do completely underneath that nobody has to see. And we're trying to make it such that it looks really, really easy, and you don't need to worry about the details.
Makes sense. So you've been CEO of Upwork for a couple years now, right? Yeah. So if you could go back in time to your 2 years ago self, what are some words of wisdom you might give about things that you've learned now 2 years into your journey?
Yeah. I think the most shocking thing is So I ran product teams for most of my life, and there's a ton of books and, great training. By the way, pragmatic marketing, we used to give that to young PMs at PayPal. It's awesome, right? So it's a great class. But there's a lot of training on how to be a good PM or a good, manager of PMs. I haven't seen really good training on how to be a good CEO. And so there's a lot of trial and error. And it's actually, you might think it's funny, but it's really, really painful because you don't want to suck, right? Nobody wants to suck. And it's, your first time CEO, and suddenly everybody looks up to you as if you had all of the answers, and you're like, oh, what do you do? Probably one of the biggest questions the board asked me when I took the job was, are you sure you want to do this? And I was like, that is the stupidest question ever. Of course you want to be the CEO. Like, why would you not want to be the CEO? And, to be clear, I'm very happy I took the job. It's a great job. It's a great, it's
hiring for new CEO
it's really amazing.
Upwork this evening.
But, it's not 100% awesome. I mean, there's a ton of things, essentially when you become the CEO, you're no longer the head of product. And this sounds obvious, but you need to let go. And as much as I love our head of product, she's amazing. Sometimes I just want to be like, I just want my old job back. I really want to be closer to this and be able to influence this more. And you need to learn to, let go of that, because otherwise you can't have a great head of product because she's going to quit, right? And so it's knowing that some of the stuff that you really, really enjoy doing because it's part of your DNA, you're not going to do anymore. And conversely, you're going to have to do a bunch of other things that may not be, as exciting, and that's just part of the job. So I think it is truly a question. When they were asking the question, they didn't really mean as a rhetorical question. They really meant are you sure you really want to do this? Because there's a trade-off.
So this is kind of jumping off of that a little bit, maybe getting a little personal. So Pierre told me there's an article in the Harvard Business Review about you and being an introvert. Is this a true story? Or something like that?
Yeah, it's probably pretty obvious right now. I feel much more comfortable in a, small group of 10 people than a big team like this of 250.
Well, I feel like you're in the Bay Area in good company. It's kind of a community of introverts.
Yeah. I think the nice thing about, this region is I think it has a lot more tolerance for, I'm an engineer by training, right? And so I personally do better in, a more, structured, small environment than in something like, you're in a big room and you need to network with thousands of people. But it's part of my job, right? I mean, a big part of my job is sales in a way. And you sell to investors, you sell to the press, you sell to analysts, you sell to big customers because the really big ones always want to talk to the CEO, despite the fact that frankly, the sales reps know a lot more about, what the product is about than I do. And so, as an introvert, it was definitely a challenge. And, I think you can learn how to overcome that. You can pretend that, so one of the things that, was written in this article is when you get to those networking events, I'm petrified usually when I get in, and I just, give myself a goal. I say, I will get so many, business cards and I will talk to so many people. And then if you're, very competitive, I'm very competitive. And I'm not going to leave until I've done what I set out to do, right? And so it's not like I necessarily always enjoy the experience, but I will do what I set out to do. And if I don't set the goal, then I'll probably just be drinking coffee the whole time and reading my email,
I like it. Competitive introversion.
Yeah.
It's a good tactic. Well, so you answered part of my question, so what are the things, or given your background as an engineer and maybe also as an introvert, what's been challenging to then become a CEO? What's been an advantage of both, having a background as an engineer, being comfortable in that space, but also maybe, being someone who prefers that smaller audience? What's been an advantage of that to then becoming a leader of a company?
Well, I think a lot of our companies, I don't know every company that's here, but a lot of our companies are very product centric, right? I mean, the core of what, we have a big sales team and we have a large marketing organization, but ultimately the product is kind of at the center of the company. And so from that standpoint, having been really, really close to what it is we're trying to achieve, from a product strategy standpoint, and very close to how we do it, because I also ran engineering, that really helps, from that standpoint. It does not prepare you a lot for the legal challenges that we have, or the, investor relations, challenges that we may have. And that's, the thing that you learn a little bit on the spot once you've taken the job. But at least, half of the company was something that I was really familiar with, so that helped.
So, you've got a lot of experiences under your belt at this point. What's a good, call it a war story from your last couple years? Maybe something that you shipped that was a disaster, or something that shipped that did something unexpected, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that we've had like clear disasters, but I think the thing that's both a blessing and a challenge is that people are extremely committed to the platform. Especially on the freelancer side, we are the place where they get most of their income, right? For a lot of people, like if you look at their LinkedIn profile, they'll say they work at Upwork. They don't work at Upwork. They're freelancers on the Upwork marketplace, but for them, it's really truly like, I belong to this place. And so a lot of the users have a sense of ownership for the destiny of the platform. And so sometimes when your business strategy is not completely aligned with what people are expecting of you, it creates challenges. And, definitely if you go back in history, so Upwork is the merger between two competitors, Elance and Odesk. And the employees of the two companies, like any competitors, really, were competitive against each other. But what's interesting is the users were also extremely competitive. And so when we announced the merger, the Elance users would say, well, that's horrible because Odesk is horrible and Odesk freelancers are terrible. And then the Odesk users would say exactly the same thing, right? And so managing that transition of not only merging, the internal communities, the employees who suddenly figure out, okay, what's my new role and who's my new manager and do I like, what's going on and all that stuff. But at the same time, managing the external community was quite a challenge. And, I would say, like when you run engineering, everything tends to be somewhat rational. It tends to be the machine does what you tell it to do and things go well. This is much more about human emotions. A lot of these reactions are not, rational. And you just need to figure out how you can get people to see kind of the better future as opposed to grumble about the past. And that's been, probably one of the biggest challenges shortly after the merger.
Got it. So I'll reach back a little bit. Can I ask a PayPal question?
Sure.
So we were talking a little bit before we started. So we both, have worked in consumer product, and which is exciting because it's what people see, and you can show people your work, which is fun. The downside is, you meet annoying product people like me, and they give you feedback on your product, right?
Sure.
Because they're users. PayPal users in the room right now. There's probably at least a few, right? So probably everyone in this room has some opinion about PayPal. What's like the piece of feedback you would always get about the product that maybe, you were like, we're never going to do that because
there were tons. How do I start? There were a ton of concerns about the UI, like, hey, the website is way too slow and the UI looks really antiquated. That was one. There was, something that I think PayPal has stopped doing, but for the longest time was, doing pretty heavily, particularly in the US, was trying to push you to use your bank account, even though you wanted to use your credit card. And that used to be really annoying for people. And people would say, look, no matter how hard you try to force me to use my bank account, I'm still going to click on the buttons to use my credit card. So why don't you just learn once and for all that I'm going to use my credit card and stop bugging me? Those were probably the main. Oh, and then the other thing was, which is something we fixed, which frankly internally was a huge battle, was the whole send money stuff. It used to be that there was a clever way for you to send money to your friends for free, but essentially you needed to have a PhD in product management in order to figure out how to do it. You needed to have a I can't even remember what it was called, but the main consumer account, and it was bank funded, and it was domestic, and you said that it was friends, and if you did all the 25 things, you could get away with not paying the fee. But we were trying to do everything we could to make you pay the fee anyway, and so we ended up. But these are true challenges, right? Because at the time, this is whatever it is, like 10 years ago, right? So hopefully this is not under NDA anymore, but. Literally when we made the change to what it is today, where it's relatively easy to send money for free using PayPal. And mind you now, there's tons of other competitors, right? Venmo, which got acquired, and Facebook. So there might be some competitive pressure now to do it that we didn't have at the time. But when we did it, we literally were foregoing hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. And this is a publicly traded company, right? So you're going to tell your investors that you're doing something that is good for the user, but reducing your revenue by, a couple $100 million a year. That's a pretty challenging discussion to have with your CEO and the board. And, you'd better have your business model, pretty buttoned up because you're going to get challenged on it.
Cool. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, and maybe away from Upwork. And so I've got a lot of product folks in the room tonight. What's some advice you like to give to especially newer product managers that you're working with as they're trying to become better product people? What's some wisdom that you like to share to try to mentor people?
I wish I could really tell people what they should be doing. I think, frankly, everybody's pretty unique. But I would say, I like the title products that count. I think life is short. First of all, Silicon Valley is a little bit of a lottery. If you go to a place hoping to make money, just be clear, it's chances of you working at the next, WhatsApp right at the time when they're going to make a ton of money, pretty low, right? And so, enjoy the journey, be in a place where you really care about the product, you really care about the users, you really think that what you're doing has an impact. Careers are short, you're going to be doing this for the next 15, 20 years of your life, maybe a little bit more, but you only get, so many shots at having an impact. So figure out something that really, really matters. I think from there's a few things that come fairly naturally. One is have a lot of intellectual curiosity, don't stay in your little area and only focus on the one spec that you're supposed to be working on and the one page that you really own, but try to go broad, understand what the rest of the company is doing, understand what else is in the life of your customers, and really just, be curious about what happens. I would say, particularly for companies that do a lot of agile development, spend less time with your engineers and more time of your customers. The tyranny of agile is you've got the urgent versus the important. And the urgent is the engineer. They're always going to be behind you saying, what do we do now? And how do I do this? And what about this design? And you're not explaining this properly. And you're caught in this thing, but missing the bigger picture, which is what is the customer really needing here? And I've always found that, there's a really tough, trade-off between that product development cycle, which is the grind, and the customer development cycle, which is much more important at the end of the day. But never feels urgent because most of the times the customers are not, saying, you need to talk to me right now, right? And so that's a big one. And I think after that is the right mix between being very creative, because you need to think about new ideas. Customers don't know what they need and they definitely don't know how they need it, but also being, very analytical. There's art and there's science, and you need to be able to be really good at both.
Great. So I guess it's a related question. I think you started to answer it here. So if someone wants to come work as a product manager at Upwork, so it sounds like some of the things you're looking for. You need someone to be creative, analytical, have a lot of intellectual curiosity. What are some of the other things that you're looking for?
Oh, I would say before that, one of the biggest things that matters to us is people that really share the vision of the company. We're probably not the company that pays the highest salaries in the Bay Area, because it's just impossible. And we may not even be the company that has the best, title for you and the most, amazing job today. But we're a company that changes people's lives, right? We literally, when you join, on average, you're expected to create about 1,000 full-time jobs, right? And so for some people, that matters a lot. If you care, we'd love to talk to you. We hire, he does too, but we do too. So come talk to us afterwards. And what I found is the people that came for the right reasons, meaning they're really passionate about the mission of the company, they tend to stay with the company for a lot longer than people who joined because we give them a bigger title than they had and more stock and whatever. And so, frankly, the thing that always surprises me is the number of people who come to these interviews and have never used our product. And when I ask them why they're coming to interview here, the answer would be some kind of variation of because you had an open rec. And you're like, well, that has got to be the worst possible answer. And I'm sure every CEO feels the same way, but in our case, I think we're very much a mission-driven company. And so that almost feels insulting. You're like, well, I can't believe you even made it to this last round of interview and you're talking to me because that's just embarrassing. Sorry, I didn't mean to be like,
that's good. Know what not to do.
Come out as a bit rough, but,
cool. Well, one more question and I'll turn it over to all of you guys. So, you talked about there's no class on how to become a CEO, but what are some of the things that you use to keep learning and stay current in your industry or outside of your industry?
Well, so first of all, while there is no school, there's a lot of peer networks, and there's a bunch of them that are really, really good. And depending on, like if some of you guys are founders and CEOs of your company, depending on the size of your company, there's different groups of people, but there's a bunch of them that are extremely confidential, meaning like what's discussed in the room stays in the room. One of the challenges as a CEO is you can't really share most of your concerns with your board because honestly, don't tweet that, please. But, honestly, like your board is judging you all the time. So you can't be completely transparent about what you need to be transparent with the numbers and the company's results and all that stuff. But your personal internal fears, you kind of need to, stay positive, even when you're not totally sure. And then same thing with your team. There's plenty of transparency is great, but at some point there's also things that you can't necessarily share with other people. And so finding that, peer network of people that maybe have gone through this before, or maybe they're just as new as you are, but they're going through it at the same time as you are. I think that's been extremely helpful. And then, I just read a lot. I mean, there's just a ton of, books that are not telling you like how to be a CEO, but, tell you about, how to communicate better and how to be a better manager and how to think about innovation differently. And some of which are not even tied to tech and tied to, being a CEO of a tech company, but just generally like biographies of well-known people. And you read these things and you're like, I wish I was like that. One thing that somebody told me a long time ago, which I thought was very true, is when you're very young, you can find this mentor who's almost like a godlike figure. He or she is everything you want to do when you grow up, and she's, like Wonder Woman or Superman or whatever. And as you, grow a little bit older and have a little bit more experience, you realize that there is no one person who's perfect. So instead of learning a lot from one person, you learn a little bit from a lot of people. And you try to find, in everybody, at least I try to find in everybody that I meet, one thing that they do, better than me, or one thing that inspires me and that, tries to get me to be better.
Great. Good place to pause. So yeah, turn it over to all of you guys. And we've got maybe about 15, 20 minutes for questions from you. Yes. Maybe we'll try to repeat the question for the folks in the back too.
Yeah. So the question was, the beginning can be really tough, and what is the inflection point? So I would say I was not at eBay or at Odesk. I was on the Odesk side of the business when the inflection point happened. So all I can tell you is kind of hearsay that you hear from the early employees or the founders. In the case of, the theory is pretty clear, right? The theory is when you hit liquidity, meaning you have the sufficient overlap between what the demand is asking for and what the supply is providing, right? That's the concept. The question is, how do you get there and how do you know that you're there? And, that you're there based on pretty clear KPIs, right? In our case, it's fill rate of jobs. What percentage of the jobs that get posted get filled? And then kind of a second derivative of that is how fast they get filled. How, they actually went about doing it, which again predates me, was very manual. And I think that's the whole, do things that don't scale. You can start by building the most amazing platform and then realize that nobody's on it. Or you can start with something that is much more manual. And the founders of Odesk, this is even pre-Salesforce. They were using QuickBase, which is Intuit's CRM system. And one of the two founders is based in Greece, and he would go and find developers. And the other founder, who was also Greek, was based here in Palo Alto, and he was looking for tech companies. So they were both essentially selling all the time, and they would enter the stuff that they found that day in the system, and then they would meet, regularly to say, hey, I found a company that needs a Java developer. And then the other guy would say, well, I found a Java developer who's looking for a company. And they were like, ooh, match, and so for the longest time, there was no self-service. You couldn't sign up on Odesk. You would essentially have a lead form where you would, give your contact details. But for the most part, it was really much, from an outbound standpoint. And they built the platform progressively. Frankly, even when I joined, a part of the database was still tied to QuickBase, which was a little bit scary. My credit card, I think they don't do this anymore, but my credit card used to be charged $250 a month by Intuit. And if that thing, if the credit card got declined, then Odesk would shut down. And so my point is, you evolve from that initial plan. And then at some point you refactor and modernize your code base, and then you realize you don't need the old CRM system anymore. But it's not, I guess my point is, it's not like there's the before and there's the after. It's very much a continuum, and the challenge keeps, changing over time. you launch new countries, you launch new categories, and a lot of the same thing needs to happen again. It's really, how do you build the supply when there's no demand, and how do you build the demand where there's no supply?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can summarize the question because it's a long question, but essentially the question is, you have simple projects and you have complex projects, and how do you build a UI that scales across the board, right? And I think that's actually, eBay had the same issue too, is do you want to be a horizontal marketplace? And then you're, not perfect for for everyone. You're kind of good enough for most people, but you're never perfect for, the extreme cases. Or do you build a vertical marketplace, in which case you might be amazing at a very specific use case, but your addressable market might be a lot smaller. And then all the challenges around liquidity can also be enhanced. Our approach has always been a horizontal marketplace, right? So to your question, we do transcription. You can find people to do transcription for $3 or $4 an hour on Upwork. And then you can find, data scientists with a PhD in computer science that you'll pay, hundreds of dollars an hour on the marketplace. And you'll have jobs that are tiny. People come to us to build logos or to translate just one page, and they'll pay a few $1,000s. And then we have a lot of people that use Upwork as a way to build remote full-time teams. People that will be your developers, your customer support, your marketing people distributed around the world forever. We have jobs that are $100, and we have jobs that are $1 million. And building a UI, and that's particularly an issue with B2B companies. In a B2C environment, the difference between how much money your average customer spends and your biggest customer spends is lower. In our marketplace, our biggest client this year is going to spend tens of millions of dollars in the year on the platform. So they have hundreds and hundreds of freelancers. The UI for them needs to be pretty complex, but at the same time, it needs to scale down properly for the person who's only going to use us once, and they're going to come and put their credit card and buy the software for, buy the match for a couple $100. And that's, probably one of the biggest challenges. And, we get that a lot from the designers when they join. They say, who is your typical persona? And you're like, ooh, you're in for a treat, dude. Because, our typical persona goes from this to there, way, way out there. And you need to build a UI that is sufficiently simple for the easy case, but still scales properly for the complex case.
Great. What about you, sir? Guy standing up there.
So the title of your talk is From PM to CEO, and I'm wondering if you could talk about the skills and education that you had to acquire to that transition across the different.
I'm just very hesitant to give anybody advice on this because I think every path is very different. I would say the easiest way to become a CEO in the Bay Area is to start your own company. It's not necessarily the easiest way to become a successful CEO and have a very successful career because it's really, really tough to build a company that succeeds. But if you don't have the title, that's the easiest way. I think in my case, no, I'm not being facetious. I'm serious. What I can tell you is for years, people would call me to have other heads of product roles. Every, recruiter would call and say, you've been head of product at X. Why don't you become head of product at Y? And you're like, why would I do that? Especially because your company seems a lot less interesting than my company. Why on earth would I be doing this? And please call me for CEO jobs. And nobody ever calls you for that. Usually you ask why, and they're like, well, we only call people who've been CEOs for CEO jobs. And you're like, well, that's a little bit of a logical issue here, because how do you become a CEO in the first place? It seems like, one of the things that happens a lot is, the head of product at a fairly successful company and people want to hire you to become the CEO of one of your small failing competitors, right? And that happens a lot. And the goal is to just, try to make it have an outcome that is better than what potentially the current trajectory was. It's going to be hard to transform it into a real home run, but, you're getting the, track record of having been a CEO of a company that was not a complete disaster. And then, potentially you get the next one and it gets slightly better. In my case, I just got very lucky. During the merger, so we had two CEOs pre-merger, obviously. During the merger, one of the two had to step down. We did it very graciously because, frankly, otherwise the deal would not have happened. The other one stayed for a year. And then after that, frankly, he'd been the CEO for 13 years and he was, pretty burnt out. And I think he was happy to step down. Frankly, I think the board would have been happy to look for an external CEO. And, I told them that if they did that, I would leave. And so they, gave me a chance at taking the job. That's kind of the truth. I just happened to be, at the right place at the right time. I think that, the thing that helped a little bit, partly I had been at the company for quite some time and I was, from a headcount standpoint, already managing more than half of the company. But partly also I had done other jobs than just being a PM before, right? So I ran a sales team at a company that PayPal acquired. I was the country manager for PayPal in France. So I ran a team that had people in marketing, people in sales, people in finance. So there was a little bit of, no, you've never been a CEO before, but you're also not completely just, a person that has done just one job forever. And that may have helped a little bit. But I think every path, if you look at, all of the tech CEOs who were not founders, they all have very unique stories. And I don't know that there's a clear pattern that says, if you do A, B, and C, you're going to get there.
Well, I'm going to see if I missed anyone behind the post. Anyone over this way? Good. Okay. How about you, sir?
That's a great question. It took us about 10 years to go from $0 to $1 billion, and we hope to get from 1 to 10 in less than that. The overall opportunity, the challenge that's happening in the job market today, if you look at it, there's a lot of debate about, robots are going to replace humans. Essentially as a human, as a species, we only have two functions. We have muscles and we have brains. And robots are replacing the muscles and AI is replacing the brain. And therefore we are screwed. And machines are growing exponentially and we stagnate completely. So we're going to run out of jobs and it's going to be horrible. And, people have been saying this, like you can see these quotes from economists and, lots of smart people going back in the last 200 years. And people have said that every single time, this time it's different. This time the machines are taking over and we won't have any jobs. And I think that's extremely, wrong. And the reason why it's wrong is because jobs are not some kind of thing that exists and, they get taken. Jobs are created based on opportunities. If there are problems to solve in the world, then there are jobs that can be created. And that's why, entrepreneurs are creating all the jobs because you guys are the people that are finding new problems to solve and finding new opportunities and therefore creating jobs. And I would argue the world is not exactly running out of opportunities and definitely not running out of problems. So I don't think that's the real issue. I think the real issue is two things. One is we have an education system that is not training people, and that's true across the world, not training people for the jobs of today, let alone training people for the jobs of the future. And that's what's leading to a polarization of society, right? If you think about the elections here in the US, there's a lot of people that are extremely upset about the lack of economic prospects for them. Only 40% of people in the country get a college degree, and most of the fast-growing jobs and most of the high-paying jobs in the country require a college degree. So there's a clear education challenge that is not something we try to fix at Upwork, but there's a ton of companies that are trying to fix it. If you think about all the MOOCs in particular. The other part of this that is really broken is geography. Right? If you live in San Francisco versus if you live in the Midwest, like everything being equal, the amount of training that you have and the amount of education you have, your job opportunities, your economic opportunities are much better if you live in the Bay Area than if you live in the Midwest. And, if you go back 150 years ago, like during the first industrial revolution, like most of the jobs were assembly line type of jobs. Like you needed to be on the factory floor in order to do the work. And so when people moved from the small towns and the rural areas to the big cities, that was because the jobs required you to be there. Most of the growth of jobs in the last 50 years are knowledge jobs. They can be done from anywhere. And yet we keep doing the same thing over and over again, which is to move people. You know, you graduate from the University of Wisconsin, you get a job in San Francisco, and when that happens, two things happen. One is San Francisco is that much more expensive, right? Rents in San Francisco, like people think it's a new phenomenon, you know, like, oh, it's becoming so expensive to go. If you look at the curve, rents in San Francisco have been on average going up 8% per year for the last 45 years. So this is not new. It's been happening all along. It's just like getting to the point where it's so painful that it becomes, you know, like a big crisis, but it's always been happening. And so two things happen. One is you move the person to San Francisco, which it makes it that much more expensive and that much more congested. But two is you remove that person from Wisconsin, where she could be contributing to the local economy. And when you do the opposite, which is instead of moving the worker to where the work is, you move the work to where the worker is, which is what we do as a company. You create 4 jobs on average. Not only do you create the job for that person, but you get the multiplier effect of that person needs to go to restaurants and movies and buy, you know, clothing and all that stuff. So she creates more jobs in the local economy. And that, you know, if you look at the pattern of Brexit and the recent elections here in the country and, you know, many other places, a big root cause of the issue is the people that feel like they are stuck in a place where there is absolutely no economic future for them. And that's what we're trying to fix.
Great. I think it's a good place to break. We will be hanging out for a while up here, fighting our introversion, and I'll answer questions individually. So we'll hang out for a bit, and then I think we'll wrap up in a little while after that. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric and Stefan. Really appreciate your participation today. Just to let you guys know, feedback is super important to Products That Count. Each one of you should have received a survey in your inbox already. If you didn't, you'll be receiving it very soon. We measure NPS scores every month. The feedback is important to us so that we know how to improve our events, but it's also important to our speakers so that they know what went well. So if you could fill that out, we'd really appreciate it. Also, we have a few, we're going to open it up to shout outs. So if you have a product that you would like to talk about, a job opportunity, if you're looking for a job, you'd like to make an announcement to the community in 10 seconds or less, please line up here. For the first few people that line up, we will have a special giveaway. We've got some great notebooks and books, SC's book, Mobilized, for the first few people who line up. PTC tradition, so anybody who's got a shout out. All right, you got the first one.
Hey guys, my name is Rene Kolge. I'm a head of product at Thin Air. It's a startup, cybersecurity startup, downtown Palo Alto, about 30-person strong, doing awesome things. If you're interested in joining, we're hiring engineers, of course, who doesn't? UX, as well as bloggers or ghostwriters. So if you're interested, find me later.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Moore. I'm currently looking for product opportunities. So if you're building something amazing and here to meet people to join your team, come say hello. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Gregory Bensfeld. I'm originally from the Midwest. No offense taken. I'm a new founder now in the Bay Area. I lived 15 years in Europe, so I've moved to California a year and a half ago. And I've created now what's called Breakfast. And it's kind of a play on word, BRAKFAST. So the name speaks for itself. It's a curated breakfast box, but for the workplace. I'm looking for potential technical founders. And at the same time, I'm looking for beta testers. We have Shopify already interested in beta testing. So if you're a small startup company who wants to beta test, free breakfast on us.
Hi, my name is Haz. I'm a seasoned product manager for the diverse experience of 15 plus years. I'm looking for new opportunities in building great products. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stuart. I'm with Redshift. We are a 25-person interaction design studio a couple blocks away on California Street. We're working on a great project right now for Kaiser Permanente, trying to reimagine the future of healthcare for them, and we are looking for great UX designers.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I'm with Opportunity Fund. We are a nonprofit micro lender, so our product definitely has an impact. We have a goal of putting out $400 million in loans to underserved small businesses locally, and we're building a product team to enable us to do that. So please contact me if you want to build fintech products.
Hi, my name is Aaron Sperling. I founded the company vFlyer. We do real estate marketing. We're about to launch a new collaborative and social bookmarking tool that is going to capture the magic that Delicious did back in the early 2000s. It's about to launch next month, but it's available now, so I'd love for you guys to try it. It's at lasso.net, and then just email support@vFlyer if you have any feedback. I'd love to hear it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I was product lead and founder of 2 startups, one in recruitment and one in the college education space. And now I'm looking to gain more experience. So I'm looking for internships in product and just to learn more, or to even bring coffee for people to get started in the field. And you can reach me at Nikki Agra, A-G-R-A, so N-I-K-I, A-G-R-A, on pretty much every platform like Medium, Twitter, etc. Thanks.
Great. And before we open it up to additional networking and more beer and pizza, I'm going to have Shirley come up. We've got a special raffle from WeChat that we're going to host.
Thank you, Pierre. So how many of you have already downloaded WeChat and follow products.com official account? Raise your hands. So one of you guys tonight will be a lucky guest to win a WeChat raffle tonight. And just scan the QR code and you will see the group chat. You will see there's a chat and putting PTC, which stands for products that count. And let me know when you do that and shake your phone with it. When you put in PTC, a post will come up with the raffle page, and then you can shake your phone and you get a lucky number. And then I will shake my phone to pick out the lucky audience tonight. And at the moment when you're doing that, we are hosting a reception in Asian Art Museum on April 12th, talking about what's innovation about WeChat, especially who's interested in products. You definitely need to know about WeChat. While I'm from WeChat, I'm nothing important, but products account is important and WeChat is important. I'm assure you. And so if you're interested in our event, it's invite only, and come to talk to me saying what you're interested about our event and talking about our innovation solutions and what we are going to do in the United States. And we are welcoming potential partners who want to work with us. And let me know when you finish and begin to shake your phone and get a lucky number. I'll give 30 more seconds and then I'll shake my phone. I have it here.
Do they type in PTC? Yeah. Type in PTC. Okay, so what we're going to do is, Shirley, I think what we'll do is take a picture of the phone, follow the instructions. If you need additional instructions, follow up with Shirley. Shake your phone once you have it. If you get a number, find Shirley. Where will you be standing, Shirley?
Okay, I'll be standing here.
Right here. Okay. Great. Okay, so let's give one more round of applause to the speakers tonight and to our volunteers who made this event possible. Thank you so much, both of you. We're going to be open we're going to have the Yelp venue for about the next 20 minutes or so. So go ahead and make yourselves at home. Thank you.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. It's been a long been a long